When the alien ship first appeared in the sky, the world stopped. It looked like a silver star that had come too close, bright and silent above the clouds. At first, people thought it was just another satellite or maybe a strange new aircraft. But when it didn't move like anything man-made, fear and curiosity began to spread. Cameras captured it from every corner of the world. News channels played the same footage again and again, a glowing object hovering above Earth's orbit. Some called it a sign from God. Others called it the beginning of the end. But when the message came, it changed everything. A soft, musical voice echoed across every frequency: televisions, radios, and even cell phones. It wasn't in any language humans knew, yet everyone could somehow understand it. The voice called itself Sarath, a traveler from beyond the stars. The message was peaceful, gentle, almost comforting. The Sarath said they had come to share friendship, not war. They had studied Earth from afar and believed it was a world filled with love, courage, and wisdom. They spoke of admiration, how humanity's art, songs, and stories had inspired them to reach out. The world was silent for a moment. Then cheers erupted. People cried. After centuries of looking into the dark sky, the universe had finally answered back. Governments scrambled to respond. Scientists worked day and night to translate and communicate with the visitors. For once, countries that had been enemies began to work together. The Sarath promised to land soon, but only when Earth was ready. They said they wanted peace and trust, not fear. In the following weeks, the world changed in ways no one expected. War zones declared temporary truces. Cities lit up in celebration. Children painted pictures of aliens holding hands with humans. People gathered in open fields, staring at the stars, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious visitors. The world felt united, something that had never happened before. When the Sarath finally descended, it was like watching a dream unfold. Their ship glided silently through the clouds, shining with soft blue light. It didn't burn or roar like human machines. It floated gracefully as if carried by the wind itself. Millions of eyes watched as it landed in a secure area, chosen by a group of world leaders. Soldiers stood in tight lines, weapons lowered, their faces hidden under helmets. Scientists and engineers waited with trembling hands, unsure what they were about to see. The world held its breath as the ship's door opened. The first Sarath to emerge was tall and slender, their bodies shimmering like glass. Their skin seemed to shift between colors, pale silver and soft blue, and their eyes were bright like two suns. They wore no armor, no helmet, no weapon. When they stepped onto Earth's soil, they smiled. That small gesture, so simple and human, made millions of people watching on screens around the world gasp. For a moment, every fear melted away. The alien raised its hand, not in command, but in greeting. A translator device hummed softly, and the alien spoke in clear words. "We come in peace, friends of Earth." The crowd erupted in applause. Even the soldiers who had been ordered to stay still looked at each other amazed. The Sarath were exactly what humanity had dreamed of: intelligent, kind, and peaceful. Their voices were calm and their movements were graceful. They spoke about unity, shared knowledge, and the hope of a better future. They said they had watched Earth's broadcasts for years, the music, the films, the stories of love and courage, and believed humanity was ready to join the greater community of the stars. The world believed them. Why wouldn't they? After centuries of division, this felt like a miracle. News channels called it the Day of Peace. People threw flowers in the streets. Children waved flags not of their country but of Earth. Everyone wanted to meet the Sarath, to learn from them, to understand what life was like beyond the stars. The aliens began meeting with scientists and leaders. They shared small pieces of their technology: clean energy devices, medical tools that healed wounds instantly, and knowledge about planets that humans had never even seen. They said they wanted nothing in return except friendship, yet beneath the joy there was curiosity mixed with greed. Governments quietly studied the Sarath technology, wondering how to use it for power. Corporations began to dream of profit. Military forces analyzed the ship, trying to learn its weaknesses, but none of that was visible to the public. To the people, this was still a golden age. The Sarath were treated as honored guests. Wherever they went, crowds gathered to see them. They smiled, they spoke softly, and they seemed genuinely fascinated by humanity. They asked endless questions about Earth, its people, its animals, its history. But some questions were strange. They asked why humans built weapons, why they fought over land, why they hurt each other. The humans laughed awkwardly and said, "Those are things of the past." The Serath nodded politely, believing every word. For the Serath, this world seemed gentle compared to their own experiences. Their species had lived in peace for centuries. Violence was unknown to them. They saw art as truth and emotion as sacred. So when they studied Earth songs, poems, and movies, they thought it was all real, that every human was kind, noble, and brave. They thought Earth was a paradise filled with love and harmony. To them, humans were a gift, a mirror of what they hoped all intelligent life could become. They couldn't imagine that the stories were fiction, or that behind the beauty there was also pain. The first week after their arrival was filled with celebration. The United Nations held a special meeting broadcast to every country. A Serath representative stood beside human leaders, their voice calm and sincere. They spoke of joining hands, of ending hunger and disease. The world seemed ready to believe in miracles again. Some people even started calling the Serath the Star Angels. Religious leaders claimed their arrival was written in ancient prophecies. Scientists saw it as the greatest discovery in history. For once, the entire planet agreed on something. This was the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. But not everyone felt at ease. Some military officials were uneasy. They didn't trust the aliens' kindness. "No one travels light years just to say hello," one general whispered during a meeting. They must want something. Others argued that the Serath were too naive, that their trust could easily be manipulated. Rumors began to spread online. Theories that the aliens were spies or invaders or even divine beings. But none of that mattered to the millions of people who believed this was the greatest moment in human history. In those early days, the Serath walked among humans without fear. They visited hospitals, universities, and museums. They spoke kindly to children and thanked everyone they met. They seemed fascinated by music, especially songs that spoke about love and hope. One Serath even said, "Your people sing with the voice of the stars." It touched everyone who heard it. The aliens seemed so pure, so gentle, that even skeptics began to soften. Humanity, for the first time in centuries, felt united under one dream, the dream of belonging to something bigger than themselves. As days turned into weeks, the connection between humans and Serath grew stronger. They shared meals, exchanged gifts, and told stories late into the night. People felt that the universe had finally accepted them as equals. The Serath, in turn, believed they had finally found friends in the vast emptiness of space. They never questioned the weapons around them, the soldiers standing watch, or the nervous looks from certain officials. They thought it was human tradition, nothing more. They didn't see the warning signs, and neither did humanity. And so, under the shining skies of Earth, both species smiled at each other with open hearts. The Serath believed they had found peace. Humans believed they had found proof that they were not alone. Neither side knew that their meeting, built on misunderstanding and hope, was only the calm before the storm, a storm that would reveal what humanity truly was. The Serath believed they had found paradise. From their first moments on Earth, they saw smiling faces, laughter, and celebrations. They watched parades held in their honor, children waving flags and musicians singing songs about unity and peace. To them, it was proof that their understanding of humanity had been right. They had come to the home of kind hearts, to a species that had grown beyond hate and war. What they didn't know was that the peace they saw was only on the surface. Behind the smiles were hidden agendas, political tensions, and centuries of mistrust waiting for a reason to return. When the Serath shared their technology with the world, it was meant as a gift. They believed in giving freely without expectation. They handed over energy cells that could power entire cities without pollution, medicines that could cure diseases within minutes, and communication devices that could connect minds directly. They thought these gifts would bring happiness. And for a short while they did. Hospitals filled with joy as people were healed. Cities began to glow brighter with the new power sources. News anchors smiled as they announced that hunger and sickness might soon be things of the past. Humanity appeared to step into a golden age. But behind closed doors, the world's leaders were already calculating. They wanted to understand the technology, to copy it, to control it. Scientists worked day and night trying to study the alien devices, while governments secretly competed to gain more access to the Serath. Meetings that were supposed to be about cooperation quickly turned into arguments. Each country wanted to be seen as Earth's main representative to the aliens. Some leaders smiled in public, but whispered in secret that the Serath could be used to gain power over rivals. The same old human hunger for control, for dominance, for more, began to rise again. The Serath didn't notice it at first. They were too busy exploring the wonders of Earth. They visited forests, oceans, and mountains, amazed by the planet's beauty. They spoke kindly to the people they met and asked endless questions about human culture. They watched films, listened to music, and attended art exhibitions. But what confused them was the contradiction they saw. Some humans spoke about peace, but others shouted angrily on television. Some smiled at them in public, but sent soldiers to guard them at night. They couldn't understand why a world that sang about love also kept weapons everywhere. One evening, a Serath named Lior attended a meeting at a World Research Center. Scientists were supposed to discuss medical cooperation, but instead they argued about who would get the rights to produce alien medicine first. Their voices grew louder until someone slammed the table in frustration. Lior stood silently, his glowing eyes full of confusion. He had thought humans shared everything equally. He didn't understand greed, not in the way humans did. When one of the scientists noticed his expression, she smiled nervously and said, "Don't worry, it's just politics." But Lior didn't know what that meant. To the Serath, such behavior was like madness. The more time the Serath spent on Earth, the more strange things they began to notice. The humans they thought were peaceful seemed to live in constant fear. Fear of losing, fear of enemies, fear of one another. The aliens saw how people fought on television, how nations blamed each other, and how wars still raged quietly in parts of the world. Yet whenever they asked questions, humans smiled and said, "It's all under control." The Serath wanted to believe that. They wanted to think these were only small misunderstandings, not signs of something darker. So they continued offering help, hoping their example of kindness would change the humans for the better. But humans saw things differently. To them, the Serath were both a miracle and a threat. News networks began to argue about whether the aliens were trying to control Earth. Some scientists claimed the Serath were hiding something. Religious groups called them divine messengers, while others called them demons in disguise. Slowly, the unity that had filled the planet started to fade. People began to pick sides, those who trusted the Serath and those who feared them. Protests broke out in cities. Some demanded that the aliens leave Earth immediately. Others wanted the aliens to stay forever. The world was dividing again, and the Serath didn't know why. During one public event, a Serath ambassador named Mayan tried to calm the crowds. Standing before thousands of humans, he said in his soft musical voice, "We only wish for peace and friendship." But the crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered, but others shouted angrily. A stone flew from somewhere and hit Mayan's shoulder. He didn't flinch. He didn't even understand what had happened. The Serath didn't know violence the way humans did. They couldn't comprehend hate for the sake of fear. When soldiers quickly surrounded the aliens to protect them, Man whispered to one of them, "Why do your people fear kindness?" The soldier had no answer. Back in their ship, the Serath leaders began to discuss what was happening. They reviewed human media, history, and communication. What they discovered shocked them. Humanity's past was full of wars, conquests, and destruction. They saw records of bombs, genocide, and endless fighting. They realized that much of what they had believed about humans was wrong. The movies they had watched, the songs they had admired, many were works of fiction, not reality. To the Serath, fiction was unknown. They couldn't imagine creating stories that weren't true. They thought every tale of love and heroism was real, proof that humans had evolved beyond cruelty. Now they saw that the truth was far more complex. Still, the Serath didn't give up. They believed that even if humans had a dark past, there was hope. "They are young," said one of the alien elders. "They have not yet learned what peace truly means." But not all of them agreed. A few Serath began to fear humanity. They saw the weapons humans carried, the armies stationed nearby, and the suspicious way governments communicated with them. They worried that perhaps Earth was not a safe place after all. Yet leaving too soon might be seen as an insult, and the Serath didn't want to start a conflict. They stayed, trying to believe in the goodness they had once seen in human art. Meanwhile, the tension on Earth kept rising. Secret meetings between nations grew more heated. Intelligence agencies reported that other countries were trying to steal alien data. One night, an explosion occurred near a Serath research site. No one was hurt, but the aliens were shaken. They couldn't understand why someone would attack a place meant for healing. Humans quickly blamed each other. One nation accused another of sabotage. The Serath watched as their friends argued like children. The same voices that had welcomed them with cheers now shouted threats across the airwaves. It was the first time the Serath truly felt fear. Still, they tried to remain calm. They sent a message to the leaders of the world, asking for peace and cooperation. Their message was beautiful, filled with hope and wisdom, but most governments ignored it. Instead, they focused on who would control the alien technology next. The Serath began to realize that their gifts had not brought unity. They had brought jealousy and greed. The same energy cells that could power cities were now being studied for weapons. The same medicines that could save lives were being tested for military use. The Serath's peaceful mission was turning into a race for domination, and they were powerless to stop it. Among the humans, there were still those who truly cared. Some scientists and soldiers tried to protect the Serath from harm. They warned their leaders that pushing the aliens too far could lead to disaster. But their voices were small compared to the roar of politics and ambition. The Serath began to retreat into their ships more often. They still smiled in public, but inside they were uneasy. They began sending private messages to their homeworld, describing what they saw. "They are not what we thought," one message read. "They are kind, yet dangerous, compassionate, yet cruel. We do not understand them." In the streets, the once joyful celebrations had vanished. Fear replaced excitement. People whispered about alien spies and human conspiracies. Some said the Serath were preparing to take over. Others said humans would attack first. The world that had once looked united now stood divided and trembling. The Serath still hoped for peace, but they could feel the shift in the air. A quiet tension that grew stronger each day. They had come to Earth believing they were among friends, but the longer they stayed, the more they realized that friendship on this planet was never simple. And somewhere deep in their hearts, the Serath began to understand something terrible. Maybe humans hadn't been lying in their songs about love and bravery. Maybe both those things were true. But so were their stories of war and violence. Humans could be heroes and monsters at the same time. The Serath, who had never known such duality, were confused and frightened. They had misjudged the nature of this world. They had mistaken Earth's beauty for peace, its art for truth, and its people for saints. They had come seeking gentle friends, but instead had landed among unpredictable survivors, beings shaped by struggle, who smiled with kindness yet carried storms within their hearts. The first sign of trouble came without warning. It started as a misunderstanding, a small mistake that spiraled out of control. One night, in a heavily guarded research zone where humans and Serath scientists worked together, an alarm went off. A group of soldiers from one nation tried to sneak inside the alien ship, claiming they had orders to inspect its power system. But their real goal was to capture and study the alien technology in secret. The Serath guards, unarmed but alert, tried to stop them. They spoke calmly, asking the soldiers to leave. But the soldiers panicked, thinking the aliens were attacking. One of them fired a shot. The sound of gunfire shattered the night. It echoed through the valley like thunder. The bullet didn't kill anyone, but it changed everything. The Serath froze in disbelief. They had never heard such a violent sound before. To them, the idea of using weapons was unthinkable. They couldn't understand how a being could point a device at another and decide to harm them. Panic spread among the aliens. Nearby, more soldiers rushed in, and soon chaos filled the air. Orders were shouted, lights flashed, and machines roared. By the time it was over, the humans had taken control of a small Serath transport craft. No one died that night, but something far more important was lost: trust. When the news reached the Serath leadership, they were devastated. They couldn't understand how their friends, the people they had come to help, could betray them. The humans quickly sent messages of apology, saying it was a misunderstanding caused by rogue elements. But the aliens could see the pattern now. For the first time, they began to question if Earth was truly a peaceful place. Some wanted to leave immediately, to go back to their homeworld and forget this failed mission. Others still believed in humanity's potential. "Maybe they are not evil," one of the Serath elders said softly. "Maybe they are just lost." But not everyone agreed. Fear began to spread among the Serath, and their faith in humans started to break. The governments of Earth reacted differently. Some tried to calm the situation, while others secretly blamed their rivals. Behind closed doors, military leaders discussed what could be learned from the alien ship that was now in human hands. They saw an opportunity, not a disaster. Scientists began to pull apart the captured technology, trying to understand how it worked. The Serath demanded its return, but their words fell on deaf ears. They were treated as guests in name, but in truth they had become prisoners of politics. The humans who once welcomed them now watched them with suspicion, and the Serath started to do the same. The aliens studied the planet more carefully after that. They examined human biology, psychology, and history with cold precision. What they discovered was shocking. Humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. Their bodies were fragile but incredibly adaptable. They could live in deserts, jungles, ice, and even toxic cities. They could eat almost anything, survive diseases that would kill other life forms, and heal faster than expected. But what truly disturbed the Serath was the human mind. It was capable of deep love, kindness, and creativity, but also cruelty, rage, and destruction. They saw how humans fought endless wars, even among their own kind, and how they justified it with pride. The Serath began to whisper among themselves, using a new word to describe Earth: a death world. To the Serath, a death world meant a planet so dangerous that life had to become fierce just to survive. Earth's storms, earthquakes, and predators had forced humanity to evolve into something both beautiful and terrifying. Everything on this planet fought for life, from the smallest insect to the largest beast. Even the plants defended themselves with thorns, poison, or fire. The Serath realized that humans were products of this chaos. They were strong because their world demanded it, and in that strength lay both greatness and danger. As the Serath studied more, their fear deepened. They watched videos of human history, wars that destroyed cities, weapons that could burn the sky, and stories of entire nations wiped out. They saw soldiers marching proudly after battle, people cheering for victory even when millions had died. Yet in the same archives, they also found acts of compassion that moved them to tears. Humans risking their lives for strangers, rebuilding what had been lost, forgiving even their enemies. This contradiction confused them deeply. How can they hold both peace and war in their hearts? One Serath scholar asked. How can a creature capable of love also invent so many ways to kill? There was no answer. Meanwhile, tension on Earth reached a breaking point. The nations that had once united for peace began to accuse one another of plotting against the Serath. Protests erupted. Some people demanded the aliens leave before war began. Others begged them to stay, hoping they could guide humanity toward peace. In the middle of this chaos, the Serath became silent observers, watching the species they had once admired slowly unravel. The humans who met with them noticed the change. The warmth in the aliens' eyes had faded, replaced by quiet caution. Then came another incident that pushed everything over the edge. During a large international summit where humans and Serath were supposed to discuss future cooperation, a terrorist group attacked. They claimed to be protecting humanity from alien invasion. Explosions rocked the conference hall. Smoke filled the air. The Serath shields protected some people, but many were injured. The aliens, terrified and confused, evacuated immediately. They didn't fight back. They didn't even know how to. They simply fled. For them, this was proof that Earth was too dangerous. To the Serath, even the air seemed poisoned with violence. After the attack, the Serath began to pull away from human society. They stopped sharing technology, stopped visiting cities, and stopped speaking publicly. Their glowing ship stayed high in orbit, silent and still. Rumors spread that they were planning to leave. Governments panicked, fearing that if the Serath left, humanity would lose the greatest opportunity in its history. They sent messages begging them to stay, promising safety and peace. But the Serath no longer believed those words. They had seen the truth of the human world, the beauty and the brutality, both inseparable. Inside their ships, the Serath Council gathered for long meetings. Some argued that humans were dangerous and must be avoided forever. Others said that despite their flaws, humanity had potential, that the same strength that made them dangerous also made them capable of greatness. They are not monsters, said one young Serath named Elia. They are survivors. Their world shaped them this way. They have learned to fight for life because their planet gave them no other choice. Her words touched some of the council members, but the fear in their hearts was too heavy. They knew that staying on Earth could mean destruction. The humans didn't know what was being discussed in the alien ships. They only saw fewer lights, fewer messages, fewer visits. Scientists worried, politicians argued, and military commanders made secret plans in case the aliens decided to attack or leave suddenly. The world that had once been united by hope was now trapped in paranoia. Every nation blamed the other. Every government suspected betrayal. The same miracle that had brought the world together was now tearing it apart. In the middle of this chaos, something changed in the Serath. They began to understand that fear wasn't only a human thing. They felt it too. They feared humans, but they also feared themselves. Their mistake, their misjudgment, their failure. They had thought themselves wise and peaceful, but now they realized they had been naive. They had entered a world they did not understand, and now they were paying the price. Some among them began to dream of returning home, not as heroes, but as survivors who had glimpsed the truth about one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Yet there were still moments that confused them. A human child once approached a Serath scientist who was observing the stars from a field. The child offered her a flower and said, "Please don't leave. Not all of us are bad." The alien looked down at the small, innocent face and felt something stir inside. A mix of sadness and hope. Maybe this child was right. Maybe humanity wasn't purely dangerous. Maybe they were simply broken, trying to be better despite their flaws. That thought stayed with the Serath even as their fear grew. But no matter how much they wanted to believe in the goodness of humans, the truth was clear. Earth was not what they had imagined. It was not the peaceful haven they thought they had found. It was wild, unpredictable, and full of contradictions. It was a world where love and hate lived side by side, where kindness and cruelty shared the same heart. And the Serath, who had never known such complexity, could not decide whether to be amazed or afraid. The incident with the soldiers had opened their eyes. The attack at the summit had sealed their doubts. The Serath realized that they had made a terrible mistake. They had come to Earth thinking they were visiting friends, but in reality they had stumbled into a nest of survivors, a species forged by hardship, clever enough to outthink danger, and strong enough to destroy it. The Serath finally understood why Earth was so feared by the few who had ever come close to it in the stars. The Deathworld wasn't just a planet, it was the humans themselves. The tension that had been building for weeks finally erupted into chaos. The Serath, who had arrived with hope and trust in humanity, were now terrified. Every interaction reminded them of how unpredictable Earth could be. The humans who had once celebrated their arrival were now divided. Some still worshipped them as messengers of peace, while others viewed them as dangerous intruders who could be weaponized for national gain. Governments sent soldiers to guard the aliens. Corporations tried to acquire alien technology by force, and secret groups plotted sabotage. The Serath found themselves trapped in a web of fear, politics, and greed they did not understand. They wanted to leave, but the humans they had thought were friends had other plans. It began with a seemingly simple mission. A team of human scientists and soldiers was chosen to escort a group of Serath back to their ships. To ensure their safety, this was supposed to be routine. The world watched anxiously as the convoy moved through the streets. But the humans in this team were unlike the diplomats and engineers the aliens had met before. They were the best of the best. Soldiers trained for survival in the worst conditions, scientists who could think faster than anyone else, and engineers who could manipulate technology with incredible skill. They were calm, precise, and deadly when necessary. They were what the Serath would later call Deathworlders. As the convoy advanced, an attack came from a rival faction that wanted the alien technology for themselves. The Serath watched in disbelief as the humans responded. What they saw was nothing short of terrifying brilliance. Soldiers moved in perfect synchronization, neutralizing threats without hesitation. Explosions erupted around them, but they didn't falter. Engineers hacked enemy drones in seconds, turning them into tools of defense. Scientists in the group coordinated medical support while also deploying traps and defenses with astonishing speed. Every move was calculated, ruthless, and efficient. The Serath had never seen anything like it. They had studied combat in the galaxy, but humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. The aliens were shocked by the combination of intelligence, adaptability, and fearlessness they saw. Where the Serath valued diplomacy and careful reasoning, humans acted with instinct and courage. They used their environment to their advantage, turning cities and landscapes into defensive networks. Every corner hid a surprise. Every street could be a trap. The humans were fearless, not reckless, and each action seemed designed to survive and win. The Serath had thought Earth was dangerous, but this display made them realize the truth. Humans were something beyond danger. They were the living embodiment of a Deathworld species, born and hardened in a planet that demanded strength at every turn. The battle continued for hours. The Seraph ships hovered above, unable to intervene, watching as the humans outsmarted and overpowered attackers with a combination of strategy and instinct. Bullets flew, explosions shook the ground, but the team never broke formation. One soldier leaped over a burning vehicle, disarmed an enemy drone midair, and threw it back toward the attackers. Another engineer used a simple device to disable an entire communications grid in seconds, leaving the enemy blind and disoriented. A scientist created improvised shields to protect both humans and Seraph from debris and fire. The Seraph could not comprehend the combination of quick thinking, raw power, and resilience. It was like watching lightning in human form. During a quiet moment in the battle, one of the Seraph spoke to a human soldier named Ryan. "Why are you doing this? Why risk your life for us?" Ryan looked at him, calm and unshaken by the chaos around them, and said, "Because we survive, because we protect what matters. That's how humans are." The Seraph had thought they understood bravery, but this was different. It was not just courage. It was a force of nature honed by generations of struggle, pain, and triumph. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The aliens realized that their mistake was assuming that humans were like them, rational, peaceful, predictable. Humans were none of those things. They were survivors, and their survival instincts made them almost unstoppable. As the battle raged on, the Seraph began to take notes, silently recording every human action. They could not believe the efficiency, the adaptability, and the ruthlessness when necessary. Humans were capable of kindness and cruelty in the same heartbeat, and they could switch between them without hesitation. Every calculation, every risk, every decision seemed designed to ensure victory and survival. The Seraph started to feel awe mixed with fear. They had come to Earth seeking friends, but now they understood why few species dared approach this planet. They realized that the humans were not just strong. They were an unpredictable force that could survive anything the galaxy might throw at them. At one point, a human soldier used a simple object, a piece of debris, as a tool to disable a complex alien device. The Seraph watched, stunned. How could such small, fragile beings manipulate technology so effectively? It was as if their minds were tuned to chaos itself. They adapted instantly, turning any obstacle into an advantage. The Seraph began to whisper among themselves, using a term they had started applying to humans: Deathworlders. This was a species that had learned to survive on a planet that would have destroyed any other form of life. And now, seeing them in action, the Seraph realized that this survival instinct was lethal, unstoppable, and unlike anything else in the universe. When the battle finally ended, the humans escorted the Seraph safely to their ships. The attackers were either captured, disabled, or fled in confusion. The streets were quiet, and the Seraph hovered above, exhausted but alive. They looked at the humans who had protected them and felt a mixture of fear, respect, and awe. These were not just humans. These were warriors, thinkers, and survivors all at once. They were what the Seraph had never imagined, a species that could not simply be categorized as good or evil, friend or foe. They were Deathworlders, shaped by the harshness of their planet into something extraordinary. For the first time, the Seraph understood the true nature of humanity. They had thought humans were like them, peaceful, rational, and trustworthy. They had been wrong. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and brilliant. They could be kind, generous, and creative, but they could also fight, destroy, and survive with terrifying efficiency. The aliens realized that Earth was not a world to be underestimated. It was not a friendly planet waiting for guidance. It was a planet of force, a species that had learned to dominate life itself just to stay alive. The humans returned to their duties as if nothing had happened. They treated the Seraph with courtesy and respect, but the aliens now understood that this courtesy could turn into deadly efficiency in an instant. The Seraph recorded every detail, taking mental notes of tactics, strategies, and human behavior. They would tell their homeworld about what they had seen, about this species that combined intellect, instinct, and relentless survival into something the galaxy had never encountered. They would describe Earth not as a friendly planet, but as a place where only the strong, clever, and ruthless could survive. As the Seraph prepared to leave, they realized that their mission had changed. They had come to Earth seeking friendship, but now they understood that this species was something else entirely. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were not just clever or strong, they were Deathworlders, and the memory of what they had witnessed would stay with the Serath forever. They would never forget the soldiers, scientists, and engineers who had protected them with unmatched skill and determination. They had seen the full extent of human potential, terrifying, unpredictable, and unstoppable. The humans themselves barely noticed the awestruck eyes of the aliens. They had done what they were trained to do: survive, protect, and ensure victory. To them it was just another mission, another day in a world full of challenges. But to the Serath it was a revelation. They had believed in friendship, in trust, in peace. Instead, they had been shown the raw power and brilliance of a species that could survive anything, adapt to any threat, and emerge victorious against overwhelming odds. The humans of Earth were not just survivors, and they were legends in the making, and the galaxy would one day know their name. By the time the Serath finally left Earth's atmosphere, they carried a new understanding with them. They had once mistaken Earth for a world of friends. Now they understood it was a world of warriors, thinkers, and survivors, Deathworlders in every sense of the word. They left not just with hope, but with respect and fear, knowing that humanity was not simply a friend to be made, but a force that could shape, challenge, or destroy anything in the universe. They had seen the truth of Earth and its people, and they would never forget it. The Serath departed from Earth in silence, leaving behind a world that was both relieved and unsettled. The humans who had watched them leave felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. On one hand, they had survived encounters with one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. On the other hand, the Serath had seen their true nature, the violence, cunning, and adaptability that had allowed humanity to endure for millennia. For the first time, the humans realized that the universe might view them not as friends or allies, but as something more dangerous, something to be feared. Yet there was also a sense of accomplishment. They had protected the aliens, they had controlled the chaos, and they had shown the galaxy what Earth's inhabitants were capable of. As the Serath moved away, they left behind some of their technology, small gifts meant as gestures of goodwill, but they were careful not to leave anything that could be misused easily. Humans recovered the devices, marveling at the advanced science behind them. Engineers and scientists rushed to study what remained, but they understood that the true power was not in the technology itself, but in the humans who had defended it. They realized that the combination of instinct, strategy, and courage was what had saved the aliens. No machine or weapon could replace the sheer adaptability of the human mind and body. That understanding began to reshape military thinking and scientific research across the planet. The world slowly returned to a semblance of normal life, but the event had left a lasting impact. The media replayed every moment of the interactions between humans and Serath, highlighting the bravery, intelligence, and resourcefulness of those involved. Stories of survival, teamwork, and quick thinking were told over and over. Children grew up hearing about the Deathworlders who had faced alien threats and emerged victorious. Artists painted murals depicting the battles, capturing both the terror and the courage. The humans who had taken part in the events became legends, celebrated not only for their skill, but for the restraint and intelligence with which they had acted. Their actions showed that humanity could be terrifying, but also noble. The Serath, on the other hand, left with a complex mix of feelings. They were frightened, yes, but they were also deeply impressed. They recorded every detail of what had happened, not just for study, but as a lesson for other species in the galaxy. Humans, they realized, were capable of incredible kindness and cooperation, but when survival demanded it, they could become unstoppable forces of precision and power. The Serath called them Deathworlders, not as an insult but as a description of their unique ability to endure, adapt, and thrive under conditions that would destroy almost any other species. They noted the intelligence and efficiency of human tactics, the creativity of their problem-solving, and the speed with which they reacted to threats. The Serath realized that Earth had created warriors unlike any other, a species honed by millennia of struggle. On Earth, governments and organizations began to take stock of what had happened. They debated whether to share the lessons learned with the public or to keep them secret as a matter of national security. Scholars wrote papers analyzing human behavior during the crises, studying the combination of instinct and strategy that had protected the Serath. Military planners began to incorporate these lessons into training programs, while scientists explored how humans had used their knowledge and environment so effectively. the understanding spread. Survival on Earth required a balance of intelligence, creativity, and ruthlessness, and humans had mastered that balance better than any other species known to the Serath. The surviving humans who had defended the Serath were celebrated, but they themselves knew that the battles were not over. The world was changing, and the galaxy would soon know about Earth's capabilities. Some nations realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not its armies or technology, but its people, flexible, adaptive, and willing to face overwhelming odds. The stories of the encounters with the Serath became training material, showing that courage and quick thinking could turn the tide in impossible situations. The humans involved were not just survivors. They were examples of the full potential of their species. Their actions had demonstrated that humanity could rise to any challenge, no matter how advanced or dangerous the opponent. Meanwhile, the Serath began sending messages back to their homeworld. They described Earth not as a friend to be allied with, but as a powerful, unpredictable species that must be approached with caution. They explained that while humans could be compassionate and creative, they could also be ruthless and deadly when provoked. This duality fascinated the Serath. They wondered how a species could balance so many extremes at once. Other civilizations in the galaxy began to take notice of the Serath reports, realizing that Earth was unlike any planet they had studied. The humans were not simply strong or intelligent. They were survivors of unimaginable extremes, capable of adapting to any challenge and turning danger into advantage. The knowledge that they were now viewed as a Deathworld species affected humanity in subtle ways. People began to understand that their potential for survival and dominance was both a blessing and a responsibility. They had the capacity to create great good or devastating harm. Governments and organizations started to consider how to present humanity to the galaxy in ways that would inspire respect rather than fear. At the same time, ordinary people began to take pride in their ability to survive and adapt. The story of the human response to the Serath became a symbol of resilience, courage, and intelligence. Humanity also began to reflect on its own contradictions. The events with the Serath had revealed the capacity for both kindness and cruelty in every person. Communities that had come together to welcome the aliens had also shown how quickly fear and suspicion could spread. The battles that had protected the Serath highlighted the combination of instinct, intellect, and ruthlessness that defined humanity. People realized that survival was not only about strength but about creativity, strategy, and collaboration. Humanity's identity had been reshaped. They were not simply citizens of a planet but Deathworlders, a species capable of extraordinary achievement under pressure. The Serath left behind gifts that were studied with awe, but the real lesson was the humans themselves. Engineers marveled at the way soldiers had used everyday objects to create defenses. Scientists were amazed at how humans had adapted technology on the fly. Even diplomats recognized that humans' ability to act decisively under pressure was unmatched. Every analysis concluded the same thing. Earth had produced a species unlike any other, a species that could thrive where others would fail. The humans themselves did not fully grasp the impact they had made on the galaxy, but the Serath's reports ensured that no intelligent species would underestimate them again. As time passed, the story of the Deathworlders spread. It became part of culture, education, and history. Children learned about the humans who had defended the aliens with intelligence and courage. Artists depicted the bravery and strategic brilliance of those moments. Scholars wrote books analyzing the psychology, tactics, and instincts that had made the humans so effective. Military academies incorporated lessons from the encounters, ensuring that future generations would be prepared for the unexpected. The events with the Serath became a benchmark for what humanity could achieve when pressed to its limits. The Serath themselves would never forget what they had seen. They had traveled to Earth expecting to find friends and instead had discovered a species that was simultaneously awe-inspiring and terrifying. They realized that humanity was unpredictable, adaptive, and extraordinarily capable. A species that could survive and even thrive under conditions that would destroy almost any other. Earth had produced Deathworlders, and the Serath understood that other civilizations in the galaxy should know the truth. Humanity was not merely a civilization, it was a force of nature. The humans who had interacted with the Serath continued with their lives, but they carried the knowledge that they had changed history. They had demonstrated the full power of humanity. Intelligence, instinct, courage, and resilience combined into a force that could overcome any threat. The lessons they had learned about themselves would shape future generations. Humanity had survived its first contact with an alien species, not only intact but stronger, wiser and more aware of its own capabilities. The world had glimpsed the true meaning of being a Deathworlder. In the end, the Serath left Earth with respect and fear, while humanity was left with pride and understanding. The universe would remember the events, the humans who had protected the aliens, and the lessons that had been learned. Earth was no longer simply a planet of ordinary beings. It was the home of Deathworlders, a species that had proven itself capable of surviving and thriving against threats both internal and external. The humans of Earth had shown the galaxy that while they could be compassionate and kind, they were also resilient, strategic, and terrifyingly effective when survival demanded it. And so life on Earth returned to its ordinary rhythm, but nothing would ever be quite the same. People remembered the events not as a single moment of contact, but as the revelation of what humanity truly was: powerful, unpredictable, and endlessly capable. The story of the Deathworlders had begun, and it would shape the way humanity saw itself and the way the galaxy would see them forever. The legacy of that encounter would endure. The humans who had once seemed ordinary were now legends. The Serath, who had arrived expecting friendship, had left understanding that Earth was not a planet to be underestimated. And humanity, unaware of the full impact yet, had discovered a truth they would carry forward. They were survivors in the truest sense, Deathworlders in every way, and the galaxy would never forget it.